Take a moment to settle wherever you are. You don't need to adjust your posture. You don't need to clear your mind. You don't need to be anything other than what you are right now. If you're tired, be tired. If you're distracted, that's okay. If you're only half listening, that's fine too. This is not a space that requires your best effort. Today, I want to talk about something that often gets overlooked. The fact that you're here, that you made it through yesterday, that you woke up today and kept going. That might not sound like much. It might not feel like an achievement, but it is. Somewhere along the way, many of us learned that accomplishment has to look a certain way. It has to be measurable. It has to be impressive. It has to mean something to someone else. We learned that survival doesn't count unless it comes with productivity. That getting through the day isn't enough unless you also got things done. That making it to the end of a hard week doesn't matter if you have nothing to show for it. But that's not true. Surviving is not the baseline. It's not the minimum requirement. It's not something so small it doesn't deserve recognition. Surviving is an achievement, especially when things are hard. Especially when you're carrying more than people realize. Especially when simply existing feels like effort. You might be in a season right now where just getting through each day takes everything you have. Where your energy is spent before you even start. Where the idea of doing more feels impossible. And in those moments, it's easy to feel like you're failing. Like everyone else is moving forward while you're barely holding on. Like you should be doing more, accomplishing more, being more. But here's what I want you to consider. You are doing more than you think. The fact that you're still here is evidence of that. Take a breath here. Let your shoulders drop if they're tense. Let your jaw soften if it's tight. There's nothing you need to prove in this moment. In this part, I want to talk about what survival actually means. Not in a dramatic sense, not in a crisis sense, but in the quiet, everyday sense. Because survival isn't always about life or death. Sometimes it's about making it through a day that felt too heavy. Sometimes it's about continuing when stopping would feel easier. Sometimes it's about staying present when everything in you wants to shut down. That's real effort, and it deserves to be acknowledged. You might have woken up today already exhausted, already carrying the weight of yesterday, already worried about what comes next. And still, you got up. Maybe not easily, maybe not willingly, but you did. That matters. It matters even if you didn't do anything else. It matters even if the day felt wasted. It matters even if you're disappointed in yourself. Because the alternative was not showing up at all. And you chose differently. There's a tendency to measure days by output, by what got completed, by what can be crossed off a list. And when a day ends with nothing tangible to show for it, it can feel empty, like the time was lost, like you failed somehow. But productivity is not the only measure of a day's value. Sometimes the most important thing you do is simply continue. Think about the hardest days you've had, the ones where everything felt impossible, where getting out of bed took more energy than you thought you had, where facing the world felt overwhelming. On those days, survival wasn't automatic. It was a choice you made moment by moment, and you made it. Not perfectly, not gracefully, but you made it. That's not nothing. That's everything. We live in a world that celebrates achievement but rarely acknowledges endurance. We're taught to admire people who push through and come out victorious. But we're not taught to recognize the strength it takes to simply keep going when there's no victory in sight. To show up when you're depleted. To continue when you're uncertain. To hold on when letting go would feel like relief. That kind of effort doesn't get applause. It doesn't get recognition. But it's some of the hardest work a person can do. If you're someone who's been surviving for a while now, you might be tired of hearing that it's enough. You might want more than survival. You might want to feel alive, not just awake. And that's understandable. Survival isn't the goal. But sometimes it's the season. And there's a difference between accepting where you are and giving up on where you're going. You can acknowledge that survival is hard while still believing things can change. You can honor your effort while still wanting more. You can be proud of making it through while still hoping for easier days. Those things can coexist. Take another breath. Notice if your body is holding tension anywhere. See if you can let it ease even slightly. You don't need to fix anything right now. In the next part, we'll talk about why survival often feels like it doesn't count, and how the world's definition of achievement leaves out most of what actually matters. For now, just sit with this. You made it through. That's real. That's valid. And that counts. Let yourself settle again. There's no need to sit up straighter or focus harder. Just be here as you are. In this part, I want to talk about why survival often feels invisible. Why it doesn't register as an accomplishment even when it takes everything you have. Because that feeling doesn't come from nowhere. At some point, most of us absorbed the message that effort only matters if it produces results. That trying doesn't count unless it leads somewhere. That struggle is only valuable if it turns into success. And when your effort is just to keep existing, it can feel like it doesn't qualify. Like it's not enough to matter. Like you're falling short of what you should be doing. But here's the thing. The world's definition of achievement is narrow. It celebrates the visible, the measurable, the things that can be posted or shared or proven. It doesn't account for the invisible work of staying steady, of managing anxiety while going through the motions, of showing up to responsibilities when your mind is elsewhere, of holding yourself together when everything inside feels like it's falling apart. That work is real, even if no one sees it, even if it doesn't result in anything tangible, even if, at the end of the day, you feel like you did nothing. You did something. You kept going. There's a kind of strength in that which doesn't get talked about enough. The strength it takes to continue when you're not inspired, when you're not motivated, when you're not even sure why you're trying anymore. That's not weakness. That's endurance. And endurance is how people make it through seasons that don't end quickly. You might be in a season like that right now, where there's no clear resolution, no obvious way forward, just the reality of another day that needs to be gotten through. And in those seasons, it's easy to feel like you're stagnating, like life is passing you by while you're stuck in place. But standing still is not the same as doing nothing. Sometimes standing still is the hardest thing you can do. It means you're not giving up. You're not walking away. You're not letting the weight of everything crush you completely. You're holding your ground. And that takes more effort than people realize. Think about how often we're told that if something is hard, we should push through it. That discomfort is a sign we're growing. That struggle means we're on the right path. But sometimes struggle just means things are hard. It doesn't always mean growth. It doesn't always lead somewhere meaningful. Sometimes it's just difficult, and you're doing your best to survive it. And that's okay. You don't need to find meaning in every hard moment. You don't need to turn suffering into a lesson. You don't need to justify your struggle by making it productive. Sometimes survival is enough on its own. There's also something important to understand about effort. Effort doesn't always look active. Sometimes it looks like staying in bed because getting up feels impossible, but still being alive at the end of the day. Sometimes it looks like going through the motions even though nothing feels real. Sometimes it looks like saying no to things you don't have the energy for, even when guilt follows. That's still effort. It's just effort directed at preservation instead of production. And preservation matters, especially when resources are low, especially when everything feels like too much. If you've been feeling like you're not doing enough, I want you to ask yourself something gently. Enough according to what? Whose standard are you measuring yourself against? Is it realistic for where you actually are right now? Or is it based on a version of yourself that exists in better conditions? Most of us judge ourselves by the standards we had when things were easier, when we had more energy, more clarity, more capacity, and when we can't meet those standards now, we assume we're failing. But you're not failing. You're adjusting. You're doing what you can with what you have. And what you have right now might be less than what you're used to. That doesn't make your effort less real. It makes it more necessary. Take a moment here. If you're holding your breath, let it go. If your mind is racing, let it race. You don't need to control everything right now. There's a difference between accepting where you are and resigning yourself to it. Acceptance doesn't mean giving up. It means acknowledging reality without adding shame to it. It means recognizing that you're doing what you can, even if it's not what you wish you could do. That recognition can be hard, because it means letting go of the version of yourself you think you should be. The version that handles everything gracefully, that doesn't struggle this much, that gets through hard times without falling apart. But that version isn't real. It's an expectation. And expectations don't account for how heavy life actually feels sometimes. You are real. Your exhaustion is real. Your effort is real. Even when it doesn't look like anything. Even when it doesn't feel like anything. Even when you end the day wondering what you actually did. You survived. And some days, that's the whole achievement. In the next part, we'll talk about what survival actually requires, and why the small things you do to keep going matter more than you think. For now, let this settle. You are not falling short. You are carrying what you can. And that's enough for today. Take another breath. Not a deliberate one, just a natural one. Let it come and go without effort. In this part, I want to talk about something that often gets missed. The fact that survival requires more than just existing. It requires management of emotions, of energy, of everything happening internally while you're trying to appear functional on the outside. Most people don't see that work. They see you showing up. They see you going through the day. They might even see you smiling or responding or participating. But they don't see the effort it takes to do those things when everything inside you feels chaotic. That effort is invisible, but it's constant, and it's exhausting. You might be managing anxiety every single day. Not dramatic anxiety, not panic attacks or breakdowns, just the steady hum of worry that sits in the background of everything. The worry that you're not doing enough, that something is going to go wrong, that you're going to be found out as barely holding it together. Managing that takes energy. Energy that doesn't go toward anything visible. Energy that doesn't result in accomplishments. But it's still being spent. Or maybe you're managing sadness. The kind that doesn't announce itself. That just sits heavy in your chest. That makes everything feel harder than it should be. You still get up. You still go through your day. But you're doing it while carrying that weight. And carrying weight is effort, even when you're not moving forward. You might be managing uncertainty, not knowing what's going to happen next, not knowing if things will get better, not knowing how long you can keep doing this. Living with that kind of uncertainty is disorienting. It makes it hard to plan, hard to feel motivated, hard to believe that effort will lead anywhere. And yet you continue. Not because you're certain things will improve, but because stopping isn't an option you're ready to take. There's also the effort of maintaining appearances, of showing up to work or school or responsibilities even when you feel empty, of answering "I'm fine" when people ask how you are, because the real answer feels too heavy to share, of pretending you're okay because you don't want to burden anyone with the truth. That pretending is exhausting. Creates a gap between how you feel and how you present. And living in that gap takes constant energy. You might be doing all of this while also dealing with physical exhaustion. Sleep that doesn't restore you. A body that feels heavy or tense or painful. A nervous system that won't settle. Physical exhaustion makes everything harder. It makes emotions feel bigger. It makes tasks feel more overwhelming. It makes rest feel impossible even when you desperately need it. And still, you keep going. Because you have to. Because there are things that need to be done. Because stopping completely isn't something you can afford. That's survival. It's not dramatic. It's not a single moment of crisis that you overcome. It's the accumulation of small efforts that no one else witnesses. Getting out of bed when you don't want to. Eating something even though you have no appetite. Responding to messages even though you have nothing to say. Going through the motions even though nothing feels meaningful. Each of those things is small on its own, but together they add up to a day. And a day is something, even when it doesn't feel like it. You might look at other people and wonder how they make it look so easy, how they seem to move through life without this much effort. But you don't know what they're carrying internally. You don't know how much energy they're spending just to appear functional. You don't know if they're struggling in ways they don't show. Comparison doesn't account for invisible effort. It only sees the surface, and the surface rarely tells the full story. Your survival might not look impressive from the outside. It might look like you're doing the bare minimum, like you're coasting, like you're not really trying. But you know the truth. You know how much it takes. You know how hard you're working just to keep your head above water. And that knowledge matters, even if no one else acknowledges it, even if you don't get credit for it, even if you end the day feeling like you failed. You didn't fail. You made it through. Take a moment here. Let your eyes rest if they're tired. Let your mind wander if it needs to. There's nothing you need to figure out right now. In the next part, we'll talk about why rest isn't a reward you have to earn, and how survival sometimes means choosing not to push forward. For now, just know this. The weight you're carrying is real. The effort you're making is real. And it counts even when it's invisible. Let yourself settle once more. If you've been listening for a while, you don't need to stay focused on every word. Just let the tone stay with you. In this part, I want to talk about rest. Not as something you earn. Not as something you get after you've done enough. But as something you're allowed to take simply because you need it. Because one of the hardest parts of survival is the belief that rest has to be justified. That you can only stop when you've accomplished something. That if you're struggling, the answer is to push harder, not to pause. But that's not true. Rest is not a reward for productivity. It's a requirement for survival. And when you're already exhausted, rest becomes even more necessary. You might feel guilty about resting, like you don't deserve it because you haven't done enough. Like taking a break means you're giving up. Like stopping, even briefly, will make everything fall apart. But rest doesn't undo effort, protects it. When you're running on empty, pushing forward doesn't make you stronger. It just wears you down further. And eventually, your body or mind will force a pause whether you choose one or not. Choosing rest before you collapse is not weakness. It's self-awareness. It's recognizing that survival isn't just about pushing through. It's also about preserving what's left. Think about how often you tell yourself, "I'll rest when this is done," or "I'll take a break once I finish this," or "I just need to get through this week, and then I can stop." But that moment rarely comes, because there's always something else, always another task, always another reason to keep going. And in the meantime, your exhaustion deepens, your capacity shrinks, your ability to function diminishes. Rest delayed becomes rest denied. And denying yourself rest doesn't make you more productive. It makes survival harder. There's also a difference between rest and collapse. Rest is intentional. It's choosing to stop before you break. It's giving yourself permission to pause, even when things aren't finished. Collapse is what happens when rest is avoided for too long. It's your system shutting down because it has nothing left. One is a choice. The other is a consequence. You're allowed to choose rest, even when you feel like you don't deserve it, even when guilt follows, even when part of you believes that stopping means failing. Rest is not failure. It's maintenance. It's how you survive long enough to reach better days. Sometimes rest looks like doing nothing, like lying down in the middle of the day because you can't keep going, like canceling plans because you don't have the energy to show up, like letting responsibilities slide because holding them feels impossible. That can feel irresponsible. like you're letting people down, like you're not trying hard enough. But if you're already giving everything you have, rest isn't about trying harder. It's about recognizing that you've reached your limit. And limits aren't failures. They're information. They tell you what's sustainable and what isn't. They tell you when something needs to change. Ignoring limits doesn't make them go away. It just makes the eventual crash worse. You might also feel like rest should fix things. Like if you take a break, you should feel better afterward. And when you don't, it can feel like rest was pointless. But rest isn't always restorative in the way we hope. Sometimes rest just keeps you from getting worse. Sometimes it's damage control, not recovery. And that's still valuable. You don't need to bounce back to justify resting. You just need to survive the moment you're in. There's also the reality that rest can feel uncomfortable. When you stop moving, everything you've been avoiding starts to surface. Emotions you've been pushing down, thoughts you've been outrunning, feelings you've been too busy to notice. That discomfort can make rest feel harder than pushing forward. But avoiding discomfort doesn't make it disappear. It just postpones it. And postponed discomfort accumulates. Rest gives you a chance to feel what you're carrying. Not all at once. Not in a way that requires you to process everything immediately. Just enough to acknowledge that it's there. That acknowledgement is part of survival too. Take a breath here. Let your body soften if it can. Let your mind quiet if it's willing. There's nothing you need to do with this moment. If you're tired, you're allowed to be tired. If you're worn down, you're allowed to stop. If you need to rest, you don't need permission. You just need to let yourself. In the next part, we'll talk about the difference between giving up and letting go, and why choosing to stop something isn't always a failure. For now, sit with this. Rest is not something you earn. It's something you need. And needing it doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Settle back in. If your mind has wandered, that's okay. If you've only caught pieces of what's been said, that's fine. This isn't something you need to absorb perfectly. In this part, I want to talk about letting go. Not in a motivational way. Not in a release what no longer serves you way. But in the practical, difficult sense of recognizing when continuing something is costing more than you can afford. Because survival sometimes means choosing not to carry everything. It means putting things down, even when you wish you didn't have to. And that's hard, because letting go can feel like giving up, like admitting defeat, like proving that you weren't strong enough to handle it. But there's a difference between giving up and letting go. Giving up is quitting because you don't care anymore. Letting go is releasing something because continuing it is harming you. One comes from apathy. The other comes from self-preservation. You might be holding on to something right now that's taking more than you can give. A goal that no longer fits your life. A commitment you made when you had more energy. A standard you're trying to meet that isn't realistic anymore. And every day you tell yourself you'll keep going. You'll push through. You'll make it work somehow. But deep down, you know it's not sustainable. And that knowing creates a quiet kind of suffering. Because you're stuck between two painful options. Keep carrying something that's breaking you, or put it down and face the guilt of letting go. Neither feels good, but one is survivable. Letting go doesn't mean you failed. It means you reassessed. You looked at what you were carrying and recognized that it was too much. And instead of collapsing under the weight, you chose to set something down. That's not weakness. That's clarity. There's also the reality that some things don't need to be carried anymore. Not because they weren't important, but because they belong to a version of your life that no longer exists. You change. Your circumstances change. Your capacity changes. And sometimes the things you're holding on to don't change with you. They become anchors instead of assets. And carrying anchors doesn't make you strong. It just makes you stuck. You might feel like you owe it to yourself to keep going. Like stopping now would mean all the effort you already put in was wasted. But effort isn't wasted just because it doesn't lead to completion. Sometimes the value of effort is in what it teaches you. And sometimes what it teaches you is that this particular path isn't for you anymore. That's not failure. That's learning. Letting go also doesn't mean you can't come back to something later. It just means you're choosing not to carry it right now. When your capacity is low, you have to prioritize. And prioritizing means some things don't make the cut. That's okay. You're not abandoning everything. You're protecting what matters most. And sometimes what matters most is your ability to keep going at all. You might also be carrying expectations that were never yours to begin with. Expectations from family, from culture, from the version of yourself you thought you'd be by now. Those expectations can feel mandatory, like you have no choice but to meet them. But you do have a choice. You can honor the fact that those expectations don't fit your reality anymore. And you can choose differently. That doesn't make you a disappointment. It makes you honest. There's a kind of courage in that honesty, in admitting that you can't do everything, in saying no to things even when it's uncomfortable, in letting people be disappointed because protecting yourself matters more. That courage doesn't feel brave in the moment. Feels like failure. But over time, it becomes clear that letting go of what you couldn't carry was what allowed you to survive. Take a moment here. Notice if there's something you've been holding on to that feels too heavy. You don't need to figure out what to do with it right now. Just notice it. Sometimes awareness is the first step. In the next part, we'll talk about small acts of survival and how the things you do without thinking are still forms of effort. For now, remember this. Letting go is not the same as giving up. Sometimes it's the only way to keep going. And choosing to survive, even if it means carrying less, is still an achievement. Let yourself be where you are. If you're tired, stay tired. If you're distracted, stay distracted. There's no need to pull yourself together. In this part, I want to talk about the small things. The ones that feel too minor to matter. The ones you do automatically without thinking. The ones that seem like they shouldn't count as effort. But they do count. Because survival is built from small acts that accumulate over time. Getting out of bed might not feel like an achievement. It might feel like the bare minimum, like something everyone does without needing credit for it. But on days when your body feels heavy and your mind is telling you there's no point, getting out of bed is an act of defiance. It's choosing to continue when staying down would be easier. That's effort. Eating when you have no appetite. Showering when you don't feel like it. Brushing your teeth when even that feels like too much. Those small acts of maintenance don't feel significant, but they're what keep you functional. They're what prevent things from getting worse. And preventing things from getting worse is its own form of progress. You might go through these motions without thinking, without recognizing them as effort, because they're just part of the routine. But routines don't maintain themselves. You maintain them, and when you're exhausted, maintaining anything takes more energy than it usually would. Think about how many small decisions you make in a day. What to wear, what to eat, whether to respond to a message, whether to push through or take a break. Each decision is minor on its own, but together they require mental energy. And when your mental energy is already depleted, even small decisions can feel overwhelming. The fact that you're still making them means you're still trying, even when it doesn't feel like trying, even when it feels like going through the motions. There's also the effort of showing up to things you don't want to do. Work, appointments, obligations. You might show up and feel like you're barely present, like you're just taking up space. But showing up, even partially, is still showing up. It's still effort. It's still you choosing to continue instead of withdraw completely. And withdrawal, while sometimes necessary, isn't always the answer. Sometimes survival means staying connected, even loosely, even when connection feels forced. Because complete isolation can make things harder, can make the weight feel heavier, can make coming back more difficult. So you show up, not fully, not enthusiastically, but you show up, and that matters. You might also be doing invisible emotional labor, comforting someone else when you have nothing left, listening to someone's problems when yours feel just as heavy, managing other people's emotions because letting them fall apart isn't an option. That labor is real. It's exhausting, and it often goes unnoticed, but you're doing it anyway, not because you want to, but because it's part of survival in a world where people depend on you. There's also the effort of not making things worse, of biting your tongue when you want to lash out, of holding back when you feel like falling apart in front of everyone, of maintaining composure when everything inside you is chaos. That restraint takes energy. It's effort directed inward instead of outward, and it doesn't get recognized because no one sees it, but it's there, and it counts. If you've been feeling like you're not doing enough, I want you to consider how much you're actually doing without realizing it. How many small acts of survival you perform daily. How many decisions you make to keep going. How many moments you choose continuation over collapse. Those moments add up. They might not look like achievement, but they are. Take a breath here. Let your body rest where it is. Let your mind ease if it can. You don't need to do anything more right now. In the next part, we'll talk about why other people's judgment doesn't reflect your reality, and how comparison can distort what survival actually looks like. For now, just hold this thought. The small things you do matter, even when they feel insignificant, even when no one notices. They're how you survive, and survival is still an achievement. Settle in again. There's no need to adjust anything. Just be as you are. In this part, I want to talk about other people. Not in a negative way, but in a realistic way. Because one of the hardest parts of survival is feeling like yours doesn't count because it doesn't look impressive from the outside. You might look around and see people who seem to handle difficulty better, who keep moving forward despite challenges, who don't seem to struggle the way you do. And in comparison, your survival can feel inadequate. Like it's not legitimate because it's not effortless. Like it doesn't matter because it's not graceful. But here's the thing. You don't know what other people are going through internally. You don't know how much energy they're spending to appear functional. You don't know what they're sacrificing to keep up appearances. What you see is the surface. And the surface never tells the full story. Someone might look like they're thriving while privately falling apart. Someone might appear strong while barely holding on. Someone might seem unbothered while carrying weight you can't imagine. You can't measure your survival against someone else's presentation, because presentation and reality are not the same thing. There's also the reality that people judge what they don't understand. They might see you struggling and think you're not trying hard enough. They might see you resting and think you're lazy. They might see you withdrawing and think you're giving up. But their judgment is based on what they can see. And what they can see is only a fraction of what you're experiencing. Their opinion doesn't define your effort. It reflects their lack of understanding. And you don't need to educate them. You don't need to justify yourself. You don't need to make your struggle visible just to prove it's real. Your survival doesn't require an audience. It doesn't need validation. It's real whether anyone acknowledges it or not. You might also feel pressure to make your survival look a certain way, to prove that you're handling things well, to show that you're not falling apart, to maintain the image that you're fine even when you're not. That pressure adds weight. It makes survival harder because now you're not just trying to get through each day. You're trying to get through each day while looking like it's not that difficult. And that performance is exhausting. You're allowed to stop performing. You're allowed to let people see that you're struggling. You're allowed to be honest about how hard things are. Not everyone will understand. Not everyone will respond the way you need. But pretending takes more energy than you can afford right now. And energy is something you need to protect. There's also the question of what happens if people think less of you. If they judge you for not handling things better. If they lose respect for you because you're not as strong as they thought. That fear is real. But here's what I want you to consider. Anyone who judges you for struggling doesn't understand survival. They don't understand what it takes to keep going when everything feels impossible. And their judgment says more about them than it does about you. You don't need the approval of people who don't understand what you're going through. You need to survive. And survival sometimes means disappointing people. It means letting them think whatever they're going to think. It means prioritizing your ability to continue over their opinion of you. That's not selfishness. That's self-preservation. Take a moment here. Let your shoulders drop. Let your face soften. There's no one watching you right now who needs to be impressed. You can just be. Comparison is also something that makes survival feel inadequate. When you see someone else's life and it looks easier than yours. When you see someone else's progress and it looks faster than yours. When you see someone else's resilience and it looks stronger than yours. It's easy to feel like you're failing in comparison. But comparison doesn't account for context. It doesn't account for history. It doesn't account for the specific combination of challenges you're facing. You're not on the same path as anyone else. You're not carrying the same weight. You're not starting from the same place. Measuring yourself against someone else's journey doesn't make sense. It just makes you feel worse. Your survival is yours. It doesn't need to look like anyone else's. It doesn't need to be faster or stronger or more graceful. It just needs to be real. And it is. In the next part, we'll talk about hope and how you can survive without needing to believe things will get better soon. For now, let this settle. Your survival doesn't need to impress anyone. It doesn't need to be justified. It just needs to be. And it is. Let yourself settle once more. By now, you know there's no pressure here. No expectation. Just space to be. In this part, I want to talk about something that feels difficult to say out loud. You don't need hope to survive. That might sound bleak. It might feel wrong. Because we're often told that hope is essential. That without it, there's no reason to keep going. That believing things will get better is what carries us through hard times. And for some people, that's true. Hope can be a lifeline. But for others, hope feels distant, unrealistic, even painful. When you're in the middle of something hard and there's no clear end in sight, hope can feel like a lie you're supposed to tell yourself. And when you can't believe that lie, it can feel like you're doing survival wrong. But you're not. You can survive without hope. You can keep going even when you don't believe things will improve. You can make it through each day without needing a vision of a better future to motivate you. Sometimes survival is just about momentum, about continuing because stopping feels worse, about moving forward not because you believe in where you're going, but because standing still isn't an option. That's still valid. That's still real survival. You might feel guilty about not being hopeful, like you should be more positive. Like you should be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Like giving up on hope means giving up entirely. But hope and survival are not the same thing. You can survive without hoping for better. You can keep going without believing it will be worth it. You can continue simply because you're not ready to stop. And that's enough. There's also a difference between hope and trust. Hope is believing things will get better. Trust is believing you can handle whatever comes. You might not have hope right now, but you can still trust yourself. Trust that you've made it this far. Trust that you've survived hard things before. Trust that even if things don't improve soon, you'll find a way to keep going. That trust doesn't require optimism. It just requires honesty. An honest acknowledgement that you're still here, that you've continued despite everything. That survival so far has been possible. And if it's been possible until now, it can be possible for one more day. You don't need to think beyond that. You don't need to imagine a future where everything is better. You just need to make it through today. And then tomorrow you'll do the same thing. One day at a time. Not because you're inspired, but because it's what you can manage. There's also the reality that hope can feel like pressure. Like if you're not hopeful, you're not trying. Like if you can't envision a better future, you're stuck in negativity. But sometimes realism isn't negativity. Sometimes it's just being honest about where you are. And where you are right now might not include hope. It might just include survival. And survival without hope is still survival. It still counts. It's still an achievement. You might also be tired of people telling you to stay positive, to look on the bright side, to remember that things could be worse. Those phrases, while well-meaning, can feel dismissive. They can make it seem like your struggle isn't valid unless you're handling it with grace and optimism. But you don't owe anyone positivity. You don't owe anyone hope. You can be honest about how hard things are without needing to add a silver lining. Sometimes things are just hard, and surviving them doesn't require pretending they're not. Take a breath here. Let your chest rise and fall naturally. Let your body be heavy if it needs to. There's no need to lift yourself up right now. If hope feels out of reach, that's okay. You don't need it to make it through today. You just need to be here. And you are. In the next part, we'll talk about the future and how you don't need to have it figured out to keep surviving in the present. For now, sit with this. Survival doesn't require hope. It just requires continuation. And you're doing that, even now. Settle in again. There's no rush. Nowhere you need to be after this. In this part, I want to talk about the future. Not in a planning way, not in a visioning way, but in the way it weighs on you when you can't see where you're going. Because one of the hardest parts of survival is the uncertainty. Not knowing how long this will last. Not knowing if things will get better. Not knowing what you're surviving for. That uncertainty can feel unbearable. Can make every day feel pointless. Like you're just going through the motions without any direction. But here's something that might help. You don't need to know what comes next. You don't need a clear vision of the future. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to make it through today. And today doesn't require a plan for tomorrow. It just requires that you keep breathing, keep showing up, keep existing. The pressure to have your life figured out can make survival feel even harder. Because now you're not just trying to get through each day. You're also trying to figure out where you're going. Trying to make sense of what's happening. Trying to create meaning out of struggle. And sometimes that's too much. Sometimes all you can do is survive. Not plan. Not strategize. Not figure out the next steps. Just survive. And that's okay. You're allowed to not know. You're allowed to be uncertain. You're allowed to move forward without a destination in mind. Forward doesn't always mean progress. Sometimes it just means not going backward. And not going backward is still movement. There's also the fear that if you don't have a plan, you'll waste time. That if you're just surviving without direction, you're not making the most of your life. But survival isn't a waste. It's a foundation. You can't build anything if you don't survive first. And right now, survival is what you're doing. The rest can come later, when you have more capacity, when things feel less heavy, when you can think beyond just getting through the day. But you don't need to force that to happen now. You don't need to pressure yourself to have answers you don't have. You can exist in the uncertainty. You can let the future be unknown. You can focus on what's right in front of you instead of what's months or years away. That's not short-sighted. That's realistic. You might also feel like you're letting yourself down by not having goals, by not working towards something, by not being productive in your survival. But survival doesn't need to be productive to matter. It doesn't need to lead somewhere specific. It just needs to continue. And continuation is its own kind of success. Think about how much energy it takes to survive when things are hard. Now think about how much additional energy it would take to also plan for the future, to set goals, to create structure, to build towards something. That energy might not be available right now. And that's not a failing. That's just reality. You're using everything you have to stay afloat. There's nothing left for building. And that's okay. Building can wait. Survival can't. Take a moment here. Let your mind rest from thinking about what comes next. Let the future be uncertain without needing to solve it. There's nothing you need to figure out right now. You don't need to know where you're going. You don't need to understand why you're going through this. You don't need to make sense of any of it. You just need to be here. And you are. In the next part, we'll talk about setbacks and how having hard days doesn't erase the progress of surviving. For now, let this settle. The future doesn't need to be clear. It just needs to be possible. And as long as you're here, it is. Let yourself be still. If you've been holding tension, see if you can let it go. Even just a little. In this part, I want to talk about setbacks. About the days that feel harder than the ones before. About the moments when you feel like you're going backward instead of forward. Because survival isn't linear. It doesn't move in a straight line from bad to better. It moves in waves. Some days are manageable. Some days are not. And the days that are not can make it feel like all your effort was for nothing. Like you're back at the beginning. Like survival isn't working. But that's not true. Bad days don't erase survival. They're part of it. You might have a day where everything feels impossible again. Where the weight you thought was getting lighter suddenly feels crushing. Where progress you thought you'd made seems to vanish. And in that moment, it's easy to believe you're failing. That you're not actually getting through this. That survival is an illusion. But one bad day doesn't undo all the other days you made it through. It doesn't cancel out your effort. It doesn't mean you're back at the start. It just means today is hard. And hard days are part of survival. They don't disqualify you from it. There's also the tendency to judge yourself harshly when you have a setback. To think you should be past this by now. To believe that struggling again means you're not really improving. But improvement isn't about never struggling. It's about continuing despite struggle. You can have hard days and still be surviving. You can feel like you're falling apart and still be holding it together. You can go backward temporarily without losing all the ground you've covered. Survival includes setbacks. It includes bad days. It includes moments where everything feels too heavy again. That's normal. That's part of being human. You might also feel discouraged because you thought things were getting easier. And when they're not, it feels like a betrayal. Like you did all this work for nothing. But survival isn't a one-time achievement. It's ongoing. Some days will be easier. Some days will be harder. And the harder days don't mean the easier ones didn't count. They just mean that survival is not constant. It fluctuates. And fluctuation is not the same as failure. Take a breath here. If today has been hard, let it be hard. You don't need to fix it. You don't need to make it better. You just need to get through it. There's also the fear that if you acknowledge how hard things are, you'll make them worse. Like admitting struggle will trap you in it. But acknowledgement isn't surrender. It's honesty. And honesty allows you to respond to what's actually happening instead of what you wish was happening. You can say, today is hard, without giving up. You can say, I'm struggling, without losing hope. You can say, this feels impossible, and still keep going. Words don't determine your survival. Your actions do. And if you're still here, you're still acting. Even if it doesn't feel like it. Even if it feels like you're just barely holding on. Holding on is still action. It's still effort. It still counts. You might also compare bad days now to bad days before. And feel like they should be easier to handle since you've been through this before. But experience doesn't make pain disappear. It might give you tools. It might give you perspective. But it doesn't make hard days stop being hard. You're allowed to struggle with things you've struggled with before. You're allowed to find them difficult again. That's not regression. That's just reality. In the next part, we'll talk about the difference between surviving and living, and why it's okay if you're not there yet. For now, remember this. Bad days are part of survival, not evidence against it. You're still here. That still matters. And that's still an achievement. settle once more. Let your body find a comfortable position. Let your mind rest where it is. In this part, I want to acknowledge something that might be sitting with you. Survival is not the same as living. And if you're in survival mode right now, you might feel the difference acutely. You might feel like you're just going through the motions, like you're existing but not really alive, like life is happening around you but you're not part of it. That disconnect is real, and it's hard, because survival, while necessary, doesn't feel fulfilling. It doesn't feel meaningful. It just feels like endurance. And endurance without joy can start to feel pointless. I want to acknowledge that. I want to say that it's okay to want more than survival. It's okay to wish you were living instead of just getting by. It's okay to feel disappointed that this is where you are. Those feelings don't make you ungrateful. They make you human. But here's what I also want you to know. Survival is not a lesser state. It's not a failure. It's a season. And seasons change. Not always quickly. Not always when you want them to. But they do change. And the fact that you're surviving now doesn't mean you'll be stuck here forever. It means you're doing what you need to do to make it through this particular time. There's also the guilt that can come with not feeling alive. The sense that you're wasting time. That life is passing you by while you're just trying to hold on. That other people are living fully while you're barely existing. That guilt can be heavy. But surviving is not wasting time. It's preserving the possibility of living later. If you don't survive, you can't live. So survival, even when it doesn't feel like enough, is still the necessary foundation. You might also feel pressure to make survival look like living, to force joy, to create meaning, to find purpose in the struggle. But forced joy isn't real joy, and survival doesn't need to be dressed up to be valid. Can be plain, can be joyless, can be purely functional, and it still matters. You don't need to pretend you're thriving when you're not. You don't need to act like survival is enough when you want more. You can be honest about where you are. You can acknowledge that this isn't where you want to be. And you can keep surviving anyway, because surviving is how you stay alive long enough for things to shift. It's how you protect the possibility of better days. It's how you ensure that when circumstances change, you're still here to experience it. That's not nothing. Even when it feels like nothing, take a moment here. Let yourself feel whatever is present. Disappointment, exhaustion, numbness, whatever is there, let it be there. You don't need to change it. There's also the question of when survival ends and living begins. When do you get to stop just enduring and start actually experiencing life? The truth is, there's no clear line. It's not like one day you're surviving and the next day you're living. It's more gradual than that. Small moments of aliveness start to appear. A moment where something feels good instead of heavy. A moment where you notice something beautiful. A moment where you feel something other than exhaustion. Those moments are brief at first, and they don't change the overall reality that you're still in survival mode. But they're signs. Signs that life is still there, still possible, still waiting for you. You don't need to force those moments. You don't need to create them. They'll show up on their own, usually when you least expect them. And when they do, you don't need to hold on to them. You don't need to make them mean something. You can just notice them, let them pass, and keep surviving. In the next part, we'll talk about what it means to simply be enough, and why your existence doesn't need to be justified. For now, sit with this. Survival and living are not the same, and that's okay. You don't need to be living fully to matter. You just need to be here, and you are. Let yourself settle one more time. By now, you know what this space is. A place without demands, without expectations, without pressure. In this final part, I want to talk about something that might be hard to believe. You are enough. Not when you accomplish something. Not when you improve. Not when you start living instead of just surviving. Right now, as you are enough. That might not feel true. It might feel like something people say to make you feel better, like a platitude that doesn't account for reality. But I want you to consider it anyway. Your worth is not determined by what you produce. It's not measured by how well you're functioning. It's not conditional on your ability to handle things gracefully. You have worth simply because you exist. And that worth doesn't diminish when you're struggling. It doesn't decrease when you're not productive. It doesn't vanish when you're just surviving. It's constant, even when you can't feel it. You might believe that you need to earn your place, that you need to contribute something to justify taking up space. That simply existing isn't enough unless you're also achieving. But that's not true. Your existence is not a debt you need to repay. You don't owe the world productivity. You don't owe other people accomplishment. You don't owe anyone a version of yourself that isn't exhausted. You're allowed to exist as you are, tired, struggling, barely holding on, and still worthy. There's also the belief that you're only valuable when you're useful, when you're helping others, when you're contributing, when you're doing something that matters. But your value is not tied to your utility. You are not a tool that loses worth when it's not being used. You're a person, and people have inherent value, even when they're not functioning at full capacity, even when they're taking more than they're giving, even when they're just surviving. You don't need to justify your survival. You don't need to prove it's worthwhile. You don't need to make it look impressive or meaningful or productive. You can just survive, simply, quietly, without fanfare, and that's enough. Take a breath here, a slow one if you can. Let it fill your chest and then let it go. There's nothing you need to do with this moment except be in it. If you've been carrying the belief that you're not enough, I want you to know that belief is wrong. It's not based on truth. It's based on standards that were never meant to measure human worth. Standards that reduce people to what they produce. That value achievement over existence. That mistake functionality for value. But you are more than what you accomplish. You are more than how well you're handling things. You are more than your productivity, your success, your ability to keep it together. You are a person, and your personhood is enough. You might not believe that yet. You might need to hear it many more times before it starts to feel real. And that's okay. Belief takes time, especially when you've spent so long thinking the opposite. But whether you believe it or not, it's true. You are enough. Right now, in this moment, exactly as you are. As we close, I want to leave you with this. Surviving is still an achievement. Not because it's impressive. Not because it proves something. But because it means you're still here. And being here matters. Your presence matters. Your continuation matters. Even when it doesn't feel like it. Even when you can't see the purpose. Even when survival feels like the bare minimum. It's not the bare minimum. It's everything. Because without survival, there is nothing else. And you are surviving. Day after day. Moment after moment. You're here. And that's enough. Take one more breath. Let your body rest. Let your mind quiet. There's nowhere you need to go from here. Nothing you need to do next. You can just be. And being is enough. You are enough. Remember that. Even when it's hard to believe. Even when everything feels heavy. Even when surviving is all you can do. You are enough. And surviving is still an achievement.